Welcome to Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. Each week, our hosts will be interviewing local, regional, and national business leaders to give you an inside peek into how they lead their business to success in the ever-competitive business climate.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Monday Morning Coffee with Inside the Firm. I am your host, Lindsay Pritchard-Fox, and today I have Josh Lobel. Josh recently joined the business development team at Autodesk after 20 years in the industry, and we've known each other since 2019 when we met at the SPAR AEC Next conference where he was my mentor. He was also the mentor to Rebecca, who is now a member of the F9 team. Welcome, Josh. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We met back in 2019, SPAR AEC Next. You signed up for to be a mentor in, I think it was one of the opening day classes. And Rebecca and I are like, yeah, let's go to this. And you sat at our table. You were like our assigned mentor. And we've stayed in touch ever since. Mm-hmm. What made you say yes to doing that day?
I was asked. So I was at the conference. I was on a couple panels, and last minute I was asked by the organizers if I'd be open to being a mentor. And generally my approach to things like this is, if it's something I haven't done before, if it's a new experience, a new opportunity, or really there's just no good reason to say no, I say yes. And yeah, as it turned out, it was fantastic. We had a conversation with a number of different people, and that's where you and I met, and have now been in touch for quite a while, and kind of worked on some really fun and interesting stuff together.
Yeah, so you and I both love the idea of using digital to improve the construction industry. And what brought you to that SPAR conference? Because I know what brought me. But what were the panels? What were the things that you were doing that motivated you to fly out to Anaheim that year?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. So I wound up being there as a replacement speaker for a woman who had worked at the company that I was at the time, C.W. Keller and Associates. And between submitting to present work that the company was doing and when the conference happened, she moved on to a new job. And so I wound up kind of just sitting in as her replacement. But it was a fantastic opportunity. So I was there to kind of talk about work that the company was doing, especially around kind of technology and how we were using some kind of advanced software and hardware in a unique application for construction. But the company also had a large, very unusual residential project going on at the time in Southern California. So it also gave me an opportunity to go out and check out the site and see how the work was coming along.
It was a huge concrete structure. So it was a lot of...
Yeah, it's like a 50,000 square foot private residence. And it kind of looked like, what a stereotypical like flying saucer might look like if it was kind of buried, mostly underground, and you were just kind of seeing the top dome part of it. And so the company I was with was doing the formwork for the really kind of complex parts of those pours, a lot of doubly curved geometry.
Not an easy job at all. And being out there, I think what was interesting about getting to know you is that you're just kind of got this thirst and lifelong need to get more knowledge in your stuffed into your brain. So what was it that drove you to the industry? What is some background of your experience? Because I've read your bio. You've got just such a diverse experience.
Yeah, so I guess kind of running through my background. So I started off my undergrad degree is in architecture. So I got a bachelor's of architecture degree, then came out of school and went into practice. And this was 1999, 2000. So this is prior to BIM, being kind of a well-known term. This was, before Revit, was kind of dominating the market. So most companies were still, doing everything 2D and drafting. And so it was a combination of both wanting to understand why and how things were built the way they were, which really kind of drove me towards wanting to work in 3D. And then just frustration with the way the technology was used in the architecture industry. I from a very early time could not imagine myself spending most of my time trying to fix plans and sections and elevations, even just to get lines to kind of meet at corners. And, for each of those, different aspects of a project to actually be in sync with each other. So that led me to kind of like trying to dig in and learn more about, at the time, this kind of popularization of things called parametrics and algorithms. And I didn't know exactly what those were. So I started going to, different conferences and talks, just got super interested in that technology and decided to, after 8 years in practicing architecture, go back to school and kind of, initially I thought I would just become a real tech whiz with, this kind of new software. So I went back to school to study computational design. And within those 2 years, I quickly got caught up in kind of the sociology and the ethnography of the history of the development of CAD tools, and was just fascinated by the fact that even though the technology was changing so rapidly, most people's expectations about what it could do and what it should do for the industry stayed exactly the same. So, that just kind of blew my mind and really has set the course since then for, I think, the foundation of everything that I kind of do and the way that I think about things. But then after that, I went into the engineering construction side. I wound up focusing on generally kind of feature elements for projects. Usually they were either large or geometrically complex or both, and really employing, computational techniques to realize those projects. Spent 12 years doing that. And then last summer, had the opportunity to kind of take a new career path and move over to the technology side. And I joined Autodesk. And now I work with a small business development team there, trying to work with other companies and help them understand certain aspects of computational design and industrialized construction. And, a lot of the stuff we talk about all the time and how to apply that.
The part where you go back in history and you start analyzing what the relationship with technology is in the industry. I actually did something similar with general contractors. I wanted to know the origin of general contracting and how the systems worked in the 1900s, and understanding where the psychology was in the 1900s, and then using that perspective to say, I don't think that we're actually demanding enough out of this industry, considering that our means and methods are not that far removed from what we were doing in the 19th. Well, we can go back farther. Yeah. But very specifically, to go in and look at the relationship with, digital and technology. What were some takeaways from that investigation?
Yeah, so the thing that jumped out at me was there was a book that was kind of compiled and edited by Nicholas Negroponte in the 1960s. And Nicholas Negroponte was at the MIT Media Lab. He's more recently, he was well known for a project he tried to launch, the One Laptop Per Child project. But what he did was he collected essays from a number of different practitioners in the 1960s about their reflections on CAD tools, because CAD kind of came into being in the late 1940s, early 1950s. So this is kind of like 10, 15 years since CAD was just introduced. And the people reflecting on it wrote these incredible essays that there was one line which talked about the fact that the expectation was that this technology would take care of a lot of the kind of redundant and repetitive tasks and free up designers, giving them more time to design. And then in 2008, there was a handbook for some, a new release of some technology, and it almost said the exact same thing. It said, this software will free up designers from the repetitive tasks, giving you more time to design. And what blew my mind is you're talking about like 50 years of technology development. And the expectations of this new software release were already disproved 50 years ago. And so you could say, well, the technology is totally different and now it can do all this stuff. So now it actually will live up to those expectations. But that's kind of what caught my eye. And I was just like, something is strange about this. You know, if in 50 years of development of the technology, you know, it has not figured out how to take care of the repetitive tasks and free up more time to design, then I kind of doubt this one somehow flipped the switch on that. You know, and that really kind of led me into like, well, what is the difference between how the technology works, what it does, and what people actually think it should do? And that kind of tied in with things like, you know, CAD is not drafting, but the metaphor was very quickly adopted. And even Ivan Sutherland, who basically created Sketchpad, the first kind of man-machine graphical interface that basically, you know, became kind of known as CAD, was very, very clear about pointing out the difference between doing something on a computer and hand drafting. And yet that seemed to have been forgotten. So people were like, well, you know, no, I'm clicking a button and I'm drafting on the computer. It's not, you know, it's like a digital version of drafting by hand. And they're so very, very different. And what it comes down to is data constructs, right? I mean, when you're working with a computer, you are building data constructs. And so data is at the center of what you are doing. It is not about the graphics. The graphics are a view, a graphical representation of certain aspects of that data. But I think that was a huge part of the problem, is the metaphor and just the way people came to understand even how to use the tool and what to expect from it. So if you expect it to be a digital version of a pencil, I think you're kind of going to go in a very strange direction. And then you're going to say, well, why isn't this taking care of repetitive tasks? Well, because the technology itself places demands on how you use it in order to structure the data in an appropriate way to then get certain end results, which can be really valuable and beneficial. And this is what, you know, you and I have talked about, is this is where, you know, we both agree that there's so much more you could do because the data is sitting there if you actually take advantage of it. But if you look at this stuff as basically just a way to produce graphics, right? So a better way to produce drawings, then yeah, you're not going to think about the data. You're not going to think about like, why is it so important to carry out all these other steps? So part of the problem with expectations, I think, is that, yes, it will take, you know, this could take care of some repetitive tasks that you did before, but it's going to demand other tasks of you in order to kind of create the structured data in a way that can then start to be used downstream and really see efficiencies in other parts of the industry. So I think it's, honestly, I think it's more a problem of expectations than it's a technology problem. But it seems that, in my experience, people often very quickly blame the technology.
Well, yes, because the mindset is, so I'm looking at it not as a tool, but a process. And
Yeah.
you can, you know, do a whole lot of research. I'm not the origin of that type of mentality. I did get there and then went hunting to have it validated. That's why I ended up at the SPAR EEC Next conference, because I had Greg Hale, who's been on the show, was in a similar state, you know, structural engineer background, wanting to understand not just how to do the job more efficiently, but how you can really stretch the technology to create a new process around what we're doing. And you can get it. SPAR EEC Next was the first time that I saw a real stretch into an ecosystem of digital tools. That was where laser scanning and how they could test the viability of the Harvard football stadium, how far the cracks were spreading, because they had basically scans that were doing this analysis ongoing, and actually looking at these structures and saying, where are they failing? How can we reinforce them? Is it a continual fail, or is it something that just settled? And seeing those realities and really leveraging technology to address those big questions that we as humans individually are going to struggle with. What are the tools that are going to make us better at what we do? And that is you've we've gone like from let's start our architectural program at Cornell into like let's go big thinking. And I think every time you and I have a conversation, it's about how much bigger can we think about all of this. But
Right.
what were some of the roadblocks from where like you were in school and then moving into the industry, knowing that your thought process wasn't, you weren't necessarily alone in the way you're thinking, but it may have been, was it difficult to find people that were like-minded that could kind of bolster your pathway?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that's, it's circumstantial as much as anything else. Luck has a lot to do with it. Recognizing, opportunities, being in the right place at the right time, which often I think I wasn't. So I think that has a ton to do with it. But yeah, it was kind of curiosity. It was a certain stubbornness about things. Again, in the early days when I started, so I started, learning 3D modeling in Form Z, which, was good for, producing 3D models and doing renderings, but it wasn't by any means a BIM tool, which means, the more geometry you put into it, the bigger the files got, the bigger your polygon counts, the harder the renderings were. But I wanted to build everything in 3D exactly the way it was being built on site, because especially as a young practitioner, I wanted to understand why things were built the way they were, and why was there this kind of contention between the drawings that I was being asked to produce at an architecture firm and the way contractors were actually building things and saying, your drawings don't help. That's not how we build. So I just wanted to understand that. And then once I got into 3D modeling, it was like, well, I can get this, right? Like, this makes sense. We are trying to construct something, in 3 dimensions. Why is everything else done in 2 dimensions? Why is everything drawn in 2 dimensions when it's a 3-dimensional thing? Which then led to the, kind of the realization or the reflection on the fact that plans, sections, those are orthographic projections of 3-dimensional spaces. So again, why am I not just cutting plans out of a 3D model and sections and elevations? Why am I actually drawing these separately and inevitably getting it wrong and missing things or having things not totally line up? Like, all of those frustrations, I just was like, this is bizarre. Why is this how the industry works? I was like, well, because, you can't 3D model everything, it just, again, the files get too big. It's we can't cut plans and sections from it. You can't make drawings from it. And I think that's obviously where, the industry, probably a lot of other people were seeing things the same way. The industry started to address that. But yeah, that was kind of a huge motivating factor, was just the frustration with the way things were done and just wanting to figure out, like, well, why can't it be done differently? And then, yeah, just, it took a while to kind of find certain people who were of the same mindset, because I think a lot of times in practice too, it's like, there's so much just day to day you have to deal with. It's hard to, like, if you want to kick back from your desk and be like, hey, let's take the next half hour and just think big when you're on a deadline to get a set out. It's like, especially as a young practitioner, I don't know how many managers or bosses are going to be really into that.
Yeah, let me spend more time on this project than we actually haven't quoted the client.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
right. I'm not working enough hours in architecture, so let me, put some more time into this. But, without stepping back and reflecting on things, I think that's where, things just get ingrained. They're just done that way because, people feel like it's so busy, I don't have the time, right? It's that catch-22 where you're like you said, here's a process that could actually save you time, but it's going to take you a bunch of time to actually learn that and test it and get it right until you can see those efficiencies. So you're actually going to lose productivity first before you get better. And that's really hard for people who are kind of under deadlines and, especially in a relatively low margin industry, where you're like, well, we can't afford to do that. We can't afford to spend the time to actually improve our margins. And, I experienced that throughout my 20-year professional career, before kind of moving over to the tech side, is that was everywhere. Even companies I worked for that said they were kind of advanced and cutting edge, same issues, same
Were you
concerns.
forged out on your own for a period of time in like '09?
Yeah,
Shocking.
yeah.
What was that period of your life like, and what did you learn from that experience?
So there are a couple things. One is, yeah, it was kind of I think I was a victim in the '08 recession along with a lot of other people. So timing being what it was, I came out of grad school in '08 and got a job just in time for the recession to set in. So, as happens with a lot of companies, last in, first out kind of a thing when there are cutbacks. So it was it was a side hustle. I was kind of trying to figure out what I could do, where I could add value. Um, and did that for a while I was kind of trying to get back on my feet and find something else. But one of the things that actually came out of that, one of the great experiences, was I had an opportunity to do this solo project, which was this kind of obscure little thing. It was basically an array of mirrors outside of um, a window in a house in New York City, and it was a wealthy client, and it kind of came through some friends of mine who had done some HVAC work for this client, and they just wanted to block the view out their window and like see the sky because it was kind of at the bottom of a window well. And what was great about that is I decided to use that as an experiment to see if I could design, fabricate, and build the entire thing myself. And this was, there's, I think, still there's an ongoing discussion sometimes about the idea of the master builder, right? Returning, can technology bring back this mythical master builder? And I figured, you know what, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. Like, I'm gonna try it. And it was probably one of the best and worst professional experiences of my life. The best because I learned so much, and the worst because it was so painfully humbling. And again, this was part of kind of a side hustle. I was recently married. We had a newborn at the time, so this was like a night and weekends thing, and I threw everything into it, but that took its toll. But yeah, I really learned a lot about why things are built the way they are, the struggles of trying to kind of connect design information to how you can actually fabricate and build things, all the struggles of actually getting something built, just keeping track of all the information and the parts and the pieces. So it was amazing, and it really became a touchstone for me. But I also, I bid the project myself, and it was a terrible bid. I barely managed to break even on material cost alone. So I probably spent, I would say, 500 hours of my time on that, I got nothing in return for in terms of
Money.
payment. Yeah. Yeah.
You got lots of learning lessons.
Incredible learning experience that I would not necessarily recommend.
Well, I mean, it's a great point. So, you're on the show, you have this like very extensive and kind of eclectic experience. And so if you're speaking to some of the folks that are running these design firms or architectural space, where are you seeing opportunity, and what's on the horizon for so they can be prepared for those opportunities?
For like young professionals,
And professionals, firms that are going to need to either pivot, evolve,
yeah,
stretch. Like, a lot of firms, when I first started in the industry in, I would say 2016, I did some local research, and that's where I called the 30 firms and said, I'm learning Revit and I would like to use it for residential. And that's where I got 30 no's, like
yeah,
30 AIA referral list firms. And they said, nobody needs this technology,
yeah.
especially in residential. You might might luck out if you call like some of the commercial firms. And I did not accept that as reasonable.
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed it right there. Is if something logically makes sense to you, right? Or you just have this kind of like this itch about something, is kind of follow it as best you can. And I mean, I am very much a pragmatist with respect to the fact that I, I really bristle at the whole follow your passion thing. Um, most people don't have the luxury of being able to do that. And I
Indeed. That
didn't,
is a
right?
deep privilege.
Yeah, like you've gotta make it day to day. You got to figure out how to do what you want. If you've got a full-time job which is supporting you, then to like try to come home at the end of the day and say I'm just going to like drill into something else. Like, yeah, if there are going to be times in people's lives where they maybe have the opportunity or the ability to do that, or even the energy to do it, and there's going to be times where you don't. um, but I think to the extent that you can, yeah, like if something interests you, dig into it a little bit, kind of see where it goes. Try something. I mean, I'm also a big believer in just don't overthink things. It's kind of like you have an idea, find some small way to test that. And I don't know, start a process and just kind of see where it goes. And don't freak out if you just like you run out of energy and you put it on hold for 6 months or a year, right? Something might come along which will spark the interest again. But one of the things I love is like the conversations that we have. I just love talking about this stuff. I mean, I don't, again, I've had plenty of experience. I don't so strongly feel the need that I have to personally and directly do a lot of this work now. I really like talking to people. I really like helping people like you think big and think through, okay, I have this idea, but I would need this, I would need this, I would need this, as opposed to like, no, you wouldn't. Just here, what if you try this? What if you contact this person? What if you try outsourcing this? Or who do you know who could do this? Or who do I know who I could help you out with? And I think again, just yeah, having those conversations, showing up at conferences or lectures, and maybe just getting into conversation with someone, like it turns into things like this, which is just for me, I get so much excitement, and I just feel so good about anything I can do that helps others succeed and realize things. Um, the last thing I was doing before I joined Autodesk was I was running this engineering department at this company, and even though for years I had spent my time and really developed a lot of expertise in doing and implementing computational design, I stepped back and I found so much more enjoyment in teaching and helping my team grow, and just creating the space for younger people on the team who were hungry and had the energy to succeed, guiding them, coaching them. So that to me was fantastic. It was something I felt like I really lacked in a large part of my career, and I'm just finding so much more enjoyment in being able to do that now. So I think that's the thing, is you have conversations, you might stumble across those people who are just really excited about helping other people, even if it's just in terms of a thought process or bouncing ideas.
Well, finding you and finding so many of like even Alex and Lance, just finding industry people in the industry that had that longevity, that could lend that credibility and could reinforce. I just 30 no's from the AIA referral list.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
are they right? And you do have to stretch yourself. You do have to go find that, yes, but also find it in a way that it doesn't necessarily have to be all in at once and a big scary jump. I mean, I think that was kind of you had gone into this kind of entrepreneurial mode in '09, and it was great. You learned a lot, but you didn't necessarily stay there. So nothing, it doesn't need that permanence for you to find, I don't want to speak for you, but like to find that side of validation or, fulfilling some passion.
Yeah, I mean, an important thing for me was to kind of get over myself and stop feeling like I had to be the superstar or that I wanted to be the superstar. If those opportunities come along, great. But maybe you do that for a little while and then you go into some other mode. I think you're absolutely right. I definitely agree with the fact that you kind of take things as they come. And again, it kind of goes back to that original thing I discovered. If you get into these expectation modes, those are blinders, right? It's like, no, this is the goal, this is the process. if you're not constantly reflecting on what's happening, is this making me happy? Do I enjoy what I'm doing? Like, I don't know that you always have options. I mean, I got stuck in a job for 6 years that I couldn't stand, but I focused on the work, and where I could kind of at least be learning and kind of pushing myself a little bit. But part of it was just like, keeping my head up, trying to look around for, okay, well, what might be next? And that was a long time to like be in a rough situation, but that happens. It's like, just because you wake up one day and you're like, no, I'm not enjoying this. Not everyone has the luxury to be like, all right, I quit. Because I did that too. I quit a job I didn't like, and then that was even worse, because I had no income. I couldn't find another job for a while. Like, it is, I very much have taken the kind of crash and burn approach to a lot of my career, and it is hard. I sit, people are like, if you don't like what you're doing, find something else. Like, that's nice. How nice. Like, but I certainly wouldn't recommend to anyone to just like quit without having something else lined up or know what you're going to do, because it can be rough. I mean, maybe that's what people want to do, and more power to you. But I mean, from my personal experience, man, I would not do that again.
Well, I appreciate that you've taken all of those hard lessons, good, bad, and that you took some time to be on the show with us today. And as we know, we are on YouTube, and you can subscribe for your chance to win Inside the Firm merch. Please leave a 5-star review. It really does help us reach a broader audience. And if you are looking to find more Inside the Firm content, follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook at Inside the Firm, or on Instagram at ITF Podcast. And Josh, thank you so much for being on. I'm sure people are going to try and find you on LinkedIn, just to get this kind of really unique perspective. And I just wanted to thank you for the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to you. And if people do want to reach out, that would be great. Just maybe make a mention of hearing it on this podcast, so I know where the connection's coming from.
Yeah, we can get you back on too. We'll get enough like write-ins like, what does Josh say about this?
All right. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.